funny story, though. My first venture into national politics when I lived in D.C. When I was in law school, I was by far the youngest person on the DNC committee, and we had a huge dinner it was either the Hay Adams or the Washington Hilton. And you will remember Jimmy Carter was the last person to announce. So each member was given a presidential candidate to introduce briefly. Well, he was last. I was the only one left. I got Jimmy Carter. Only problem was, I couldn't understand why I got more attention than everybody else when people kept saying, what do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? It wasn't until walking home that I had been so nervous. I suddenly realized in the whole introduction, I'd been calling Jimmy Carter a black sheep when I meant a dark horse.
Whoops.
I saw Jimmy Carter like 25 years later, and he remembered that. I mean, I get nervous a lot. And I know I have a terrible voice, so I get nervous when I speak. But there you go. Anyway, at least it wasn't as bad as some of the lies Trump pulls, I don't know. Anyway, you have the cards, I passed them out, it has my background, and besides, I know almost everyone in this room. What's not on these cards is I have actually been invited to testify before congressional committees. I used to be very active on marine pollution, represented UNEP, UN Environment Program, at the Law of the Sea Conference, was invited to testify. I have drafted legislation, a whole large piece that was adopted and passed Congress almost verbatim, couple of small pieces. And I've lobbied Congress. Also, I've been a registered foreign agent. That's not on there, but people knock me for that. I was a registered foreign agent for Canada, Denmark, and briefly Israel. But you have to register on the criminal side of the Justice Department. Lobbyists register on the civil side. All of which goes to say that I should be very ready to make a difference from day one. And I'll tell you how in a minute. I wanted to say thank you for inviting me, and also thank you for provoking me to take a look and update our LGBTQ position. Because with everything that's happening, I actually had not paid enough attention to what Trump has done for equality. I'll share with you what I found, and if you find it very familiar, just stop me. How am I being interrupted? I mean, a little known thing that Joe Biden did on one of his very last days in office was to declare the Equal Rights Amendment was part of the Constitution. He actually issued an executive order to that effect. That is still in litigation because the 38th ratification didn't meet the third extension of the deadline. But since then, equality measures have really gone downhill. On this very first day in office, President Trump issued an executive order rescinding each and all of the Biden executive orders dealing with equality, whether they related to marriage, health care, housing, employment. That was one executive order. That was on January 20th. The same day he issued an executive order called Defending Women from Gender Ideology Extremism, how do you pronounce it? Extremism, and Restoring Biological Truth to the Federal Government. That was also issued his first day in office. third one on the first day was named Ending Radical and Wasteful Government DEI Programs and Preferencing. First day in office, this is what, another one. The next day, he issued an executive order extending illegal discrimination and restoring merit-based opportunities. That was also aimed at Biden's equality policies. Another one you're probably more familiar with was a couple days later, prioritizing military excellence and readiness. No transgender or openly gay in the military. Day after that, he issued another one, protecting children from chemical and surgical mutilation. Now, this is our president. He's in office now less than a week. Then he issued one in early February on keeping men out of women's sports. I mean, I could go on, but I hadn't realized how powerful this anti-equality sentiment was. I mean, it affects, and part of the reason I gave you the cards was I wanted input on LGBTQ plus issues, and therefore you can see the general ones on the card. I mean, marriage and family, first one. In Obergefell versus Hodges, I think it was. Okay, we have marriage equality supposedly, but we don't have this equal access to adoption, to parental rights, all of that you would think would have fallen under marriage equality or something, but it doesn't. That's something I feel strongly about. Employment discrimination, there was a case called Bostock versus Clayton. Supposedly it ended, or it held that Title VII protected equal rights for LGBTQ in the workplace. They don't have equal rights yet, but that was at least this, but those were all pre-Trump. Now we have the Trump Supreme Court. And in a case called Schilling versus United States, it upheld the Trump edict allowing a ban of transgender in the military. That was a US Supreme Court case. I told you, things were getting worse than I had thought. Thank you for making me update my knowledge on this subject. Another decision of the US Supreme Court just last June was a case called United States versus Strametti, which allowed state-level bans on all medical care for transgender minors. Now, transgender, I think, and I agree with you, is a diversion, but it's a way to express hate in a manner in which you'll get a lot of support. That's what it serves. You're right, transgender athletes, 10 in the nation. That's not it. It's a way to cover your hateful impulses. And that's what I think is worst about it. And then I looked up the federal agency policies. The Department of Housing and Urban Development was instructed to revisit what are called equal access rules. That's equal access for LGBTQ from discrimination in various programs, including foster care, including all sorts of services. So that was an agency action. Okay, you know the Trump administration bans on gender-affirming health care being paid by federal funds for anybody. The State Department no longer allows, it's suspended its previous practice of allowing updates for gender markers. In other words, that's another, I mean, all this stuff is a wave, and I have admitted I didn't pay sufficient attention to this until you provoked me into doing so. Now, the Trump administration also reversed the interpretation of Title IX to stop allowing transgender students from using restrooms and other public facilities, from playing on sports teams. It also has halted funding to schools that promote what's called gender ideology. I mean, this is rampant. And I will fight to end this. I mean, to me, equality is equality. Now, I grew up in a household, my dad was an old civil rights person. Some teenagers once tried to burn down our house because he had a black business partner in the 1950s. That was not a pleasant experience, and we did move. But when I became an adult, the issue then was gender, was women's liberation. And of course I went out to all these equal rights amendment rallies. And at one of them, I met some gay and lesbian people who were promoting not the ERA, but what was called the Constitutional Equality Amendment. And that really struck me, and I thought, they're right, we're wrong. Equality is equality, and if we're protesting all these men who framed the Constitution saying all men are created equal and women can't vote, then we're doing a bit of the same thing. I kept going to ERA rallies, but I became much more attuned to the fact that equality meant non-discrimination, not just sex, gender identification, a lot of other things. Now, I was still glad that Biden declared the Equal Rights Amendment part of the Constitution, but it doesn't go far enough. It bans discrimination on the basis of sex. And as you know, there was another executive order defining sex as binary. Sex is between a man and a woman, and that's the only distinction. Well, unfortunately, the IRA does that too. Now, back in 2019, what was called the Equality Act actually passed the House of Representatives, and it would have prohibited discrimination based on sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity in a wide variety of public areas. Passed in 2019. Passed again in 2021. It's before the House now, it gets reintroduced. Unless Democrats take over, when Democrats take over now, it may have more of a chance. But another amendment, another piece of legislation I wasn't aware of, which was law, was something called the Pride Act of 2019, which directed the IRS to provide equal standing for same-sex couples, permit couples to change their filing status if they weren't out of time. I had missed that one, so again, thank you for making me go back and look at all this, because it was worth doing. As far as personal experience that's motivating my position on LGBTQ, way back, my father died a little over a decade ago. But when he was in his 90s, he died at 102. Someone told us that my niece was a lesbian and she was president of the GLBTQ club at Embry-Riddle University. Now, to do him credit, that didn't shake my father at all. He said, well, we better figure out how we deal with this. And I said, Dad, you love her, I love her, she's no different today than she was yesterday, what the hell? He said, no. So we both went and we joined PFLAG, of Sarasota. PFLAG of Sarasota was very instructive. I wasn't sure it was necessary, but like this, they were a great group, and they had the best fundraising events. But also, you went to those meetings, and you could say anything you really thought about anything, and people would give you a reasonable response. And I was kind of proud of my dad, who in his 90s decided he better go and listen to PFLAG, because his niece was a lesbian. When she finally told us, she was kind of surprised when she got virtually no reaction. Okay, so you are what you are, but we were prepared, and I liked that. And I'm not sure, I think she's bi now. We have all these conversations. I just figure I love her. She is what she is, what she is, and I love her, and that's enough. So, but that's the personal side of the motivation, beside the political side.
I think we're probably getting close to.
Okay, well, you know, our other positions, they're changed a lot because of Trump. I think the most critical thing I would have ready on day one is draft legislation for campaign finance reform. Because as I was saying before, 100 families financed one out of every $6 in the entire 2024 election cycle. Now, unless we have campaign finance reform, we're gonna keep having wealthy people buy elections, wealthy cohorts at inaugurations, tax breaks for billionaires, and so forth and so on. So that was one thing I would have on day one, and I think I'm best qualified to do this. Yes, I'm old, but I don't want to be in Congress forever. I can jumpstart a lot of things due to 20 years of experience in DC dealing with Congress. I even once helped Vern Buchanan, and all the Democrats jumped on me. But it was when the first gun bill came up, and his office called me and said, he's leaning toward voting for it, you want to come talk to him? So I did, and I turned over all our materials, and the first one he did vote for. The less strict gun bill that came up a few years later, he voted against. But what the hell? We have to cooperate. He was gonna vote right. The Sarasota Democrats jumped all over me for giving him this information. But we have to start talking to each other. Talking to each other even if we have, yes?
Didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
I
please.
was just looking at time, I wanna make sure we have time to ask questions.
Okay, you can read the rest on
I
it.
personally don't have any questions about your commitment to the Democratic caucus, specifically the LGBTQ. My first question though is, and this is like deja vu all over again because you were here before in this committee. What I wanna know is what's going to make, I mean, I understand that you're saying what you're gonna do when you get to Congress. I wanna make sure how will you get to Congress? What are you doing differently on this campaign that you didn't do on all the prior campaigns?
It's not exactly what I'm doing differently. The world and the government are different. Now, we've known, you have never heard me come here before and say this one is winnable. I have never come here and said that to you. I'm a Yale lawyer, I can count. Last time we ran against a 10th term congressman whose net worth is upwards of $250 million. You know, but it's important that somebody run anyway. And we did it with great enthusiasm. I mean, our campaign ran better in what's now the district than the last two Democratic candidates who spent respectively $4 million and upwards of $3 million. And we did it on downwards of 60,000. Now the district changed in 2022, so you have to compare like with like. precincts with precincts, but we work very hard. Now, my one regret that we didn't help enough last time had to do with the abortion amendment. We fought for it, but it was so close, couple hundred votes in each congressional district. Looking back, I wish we'd given more attention to that, because I do feel very strongly about reproductive freedom. And geez, it was so close. So was the marijuana amendment. What's different is, of course, Verna's departed. But the most likely strong Republican candidate, I think, will be Sidney Gruters. Joe Gruters, head of the RNC's wife. She worked for Vern, she worked for Stubbe. DeSantis appointed her to the new college board. It's not big on issues, and at least the country is paying some attention. But the country has changed, and even this locality has changed more than I. So then,
I'm sorry.
That's a good answer, thank you.
So in terms of, if it is Gruder, there are a few other names that are out there right
yes,
now.
I
She hasn't
know
committed
that.
at this point, from what I understand.
Eddie Spear is running again.
Right.
He's poisonous, but anyway.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of my questions to you. Is even if it's Gruters, who will have a lot of money then?
Oh, unlimited.
And you will run the same kind of monetary difference between, like you did in 2024 with Buchanan. You're gonna have to overcome that. But if it isn't Gruters, and it is, what was his name?
Eddie.
Eddie Spears.
Yeah.
Spears.
What kind of campaign are you gonna run? Are you going, in other words, are we going to do I've said this to other candidates, you were here last time when I said to Glenn, are we gonna have a Michelle Obama campaign where when they go low, you go high? Or are we going to actually grab their throats and tell the public what they are? Are you gonna be nice? Or are you gonna be hard?
Something in between. We are going to be civil, but not nice. What I can't stand is the lying and the calculated attacks, which have nothing to do with the issues at hand. And also with my voice, which is a birth defect. I learned long ago I'm never gonna outshout anybody. So I'm a litigator. What I do is get up there and I whisper, and judges and juries lean forward to hear. It's effective. I mean, we're not gonna raise, no Democratic candidate here is gonna raise a whole lot of money. Let's face it. I mean, as I said, we did better on 60,000, and we've already raised that, than the previous two Democratic candidates did in the same area on millions. We work very hard.
Well, I don't question that you worked hard. I know you worked hard.
And it had
But-
results. It may be
I do want to get other questions,
Yeah.
so I see
Okay,
where
I'm
you're
sorry.
going.
I
think
see
it's
it may
asked
be
and answered,
winnable,
so-
it may not, we don't even know the district, but you can bet it's gonna be worse. The Republicans wanna get rid of Kathy Castor and Maxwell Frost, and the maps that are circulating are not encouraging. But it's still worth doing. I am a believer, and we have to fight for what we believe in, and statewide and national candidates and issues.
Thank you, Jan.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have one myself, which is one of the big issues I think that most of us see in Congress as well, is that they are not upholding the responsibilities and duties of the legislative branch of government. So how do we change that? If you were in office, what lever is available to try to get the House to actually be responsible in controlling the purse, which they seem to think is really a prerogative now of the White House rather than of Congress.
Well, we're not gonna change the MAGA types. A lot of the people that are quitting, Vern is straight MAGA now. Vern actually didn't start out as bad as he ended up. I mean, he actually even voted to raise the minimum wage in his first term. Of course, it's been $7.25 since, is it 2007 or 2009, but a very long time. If we get a Democratic majority, there are a lot of things that can be done. It can be in the Senate, for example. We can't get rid of this Supreme Court. We can't put fewer judges without a constitutional amendment. But we can reinstate the filibuster for Supreme Court nominees, which for years and years and years resulted in more balanced members of the Supreme Court. And it was us as Democrats who got rid of the filibuster for other court nominees, the Republicans. Now,
That's Senate though, so in the House.
yeah, in the House, well, for one thing, we can have better communications. Of course, town halls. We have Zoom meetings once a month. We're gonna kick them up. We wanna know where the districts are. But it's one of the advantages of being old. I'm not building a career. I don't mind saying exactly what I think when I think it, and with a good deal of logic. I mean, my law school class, I'm also downwardly mobile. The Clintons were in the class, Bob Rice was in the class, Gene Ludwig was in the class, Clarence Thomas, well, I don't put him up there, but he was a sleazebag back then, he's a sleazebag now, but we use the opportunity we have and explain as best we can and also do it on issues. Now, sometimes constituents conflict with party issues. For example, constituents in this area hate the estate tax, don't want it to be re-lowered the limits. I'd have a hard time with that because people here have expressed themselves so clearly. But that's a minor tax. Get rid of the billionaire tax breaks in the big bad bill, of course. But we have to communicate better. One thing I would use part of congressional appropriations for, or even salary if I had to, was to buy at least a half hour of local TV time a week for questions and answers. Also, instead of having two offices, have a mobile office so we can go to events in distinct parts of the county. I mean, I'm very lucky. I have a lot of energy, maybe too much, but there you go.
Okay. I would like to get a pledge, though, that if you are elected, you will not do Insta polls like Vern Buchanan has abused us with every week. So can I count on you to stop that?
Raise your right hand.
Yeah, but I won't. But I will keep replying to his comments to post.
Absolutely.
Every
Question
time.
over here.
Yes,
Pete?
Question, and by the way, do you remember Claude Pepper?
of course.
Right, what do you call it? The first time he ran, his daughter was in the theater, program at like Florida State, as I recall, something like that. And his opponent, in a very soft voice said, "Oh, I hate to tell you people, his daughter is a thespian." And and of course, upstate, Florida, they don't know the difference. But anyways, how, in the reason Claude Pepper came to mind, is he kind of made a career out of Social Security, fighting for benefits and money for the regular person, or the older people, like me. And we're gonna be having a shortfall pretty soon. And there's been absolutely nothing on board to address that. And I'm just wondering where you stand on that.
Well, that's critical, particularly to this district in this area.
Right.
We are consistently, 7 of the top 10 districts by age are in Florida, but we've been as high as number 2. So while we have to appeal to more young people here, the fact is that senior rights and senior interests, Social Security in particular, but Medicare as well, we've got to restore those cuts. They are more important here than in 425 other districts in the country. I remember Claude Pepper. I once ran on the Claude Pepper platform, but people didn't understand it, so I gave that up. He was a great champion, and it's not the in thing these days to be a champion of senior rights. But the fact is that seniors and children and people with disabilities are the people who need government the most. We're giving the most to billionaires, but that's not the way it belongs.
Yeah, because that $12,000 big beautiful bill credit, I'm one that it did in fact help a few. I got saved a few bucks on it. I just finished my taxes. But what he was saying was, oh, no tax on Social Security, and it fell way short of that.
Well, it falls short of it. Now, what we can do with Social Security, and I would advocate, though a lot of people don't want, raise the cap.
Yeah, absolutely.
Make the system more stable. What is it now? 138,000 or something like that. The system, we're getting fewer young people. We have to adjust that. And it won't hurt your ordinary, if there's any middle class left, that's not who it'll hurt. And furthermore, people at the higher income levels have a lot more ways to avoid taxes than all of the rest of us. So I favor raising the cap. I'm a Medicare for all person. Now, I could compromise and say, keep the supplements, but make a way for people who can't afford a supplement, have a subsidy for it. When I have an exception though to Medicare for all, and that's that we have to revive and revitalize the veterans' healthcare system. Veterans have different needs than the rest of us. Much greater PTSD and other mental illness, much greater severe wounds. And right now, with the increased distances, the cutbacks, the system is ill-serving them. So I make that as an exception to Medicare for all. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Well, thank you. I think we'll go ahead and, again, thank you for coming and spending the time with us and sharing both your knowledge and your commitment to our community and to social justice across the board. So.
Well, that's why I also love your Sunday socials. You know, you can say what you want and you get honest responses, and other clubs and caucuses don't do that. I don't know if they don't like each other, but I think it's great. Thank you all very much for coming.
We have petitions for Jan. I know we've passed them around before, and I'll do it again, so that anyone who has not signed a petition to get Jan on the ballot, please do so. It's an indication that you support Democrats running for office, and that's it. So it's not a statement of where your vote goes, but it's very important that we do that. So we'll pass those around as well.
You support anybody. I mean, I'll sign anybody's petitions.
Exactly.
Because I think it's the right thing to do. We weren't gonna get them this time because 4 of us got COVID in the big rush and big things at the end of last time. But we decided, since the number was cut in half with redistricting, we'll do a last minute rush. And so we've started very late. But thank you all again. Do you want to sit back there?
Yeah, that'd be better than.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you.